Welcome to Resilient Conversations. This is our bi-weekly conversation about what it means to be truly resilient in these challenging times. And I'm going to be introducing my guest, Anita Stewart, who has her story to share about her life challenges and what she's learned and the lessons that she'd like to share about those experiences. So thank you for joining me today, Anita. It's been a pleasure. We've known each other since 2017, I think, when we met each other at a women's group online. So Anita's going to start with an introduction of her background and then share her story. And I look forward to hearing what she has to say. And at this point, Anita, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My life was pretty normal. I was raised in a very staunchly Catholic home, and my mother was an artist and a housewife, and my father was a very public figure, worked in radio and television. And during those times, men were not too faithful. Many men were not too faithful. He When I was 17, he decided to leave my mother. So that was really the first rough experience for me. Um, he he left my mother in front of us in the living room and walked out, and that kind of cemented my attitude towards men and relationships going forward, always looking for the man I couldn't have, and assuming that they would abandon me. So I lived in Florida. We had moved to Florida when I was 12. I got caught up in the tourist industry after high school, worked many jobs, but mostly hotels, restaurants, waitress. Realized that the cost of living was so low, it was going to be real tough for me to go to college. So I entered the military. And when I went into the military, it was during peacetime. And I was stationed in several different theaters, but my favorite was Greece. So I was in Athens, Greece for 3 years, supporting a reconnaissance mission and doing the pre-mission briefings for the East Med. Um, and this was daily. And during that tour of duty, um, I had I had married, but my husband died during that tour of duty, and it was a very mysterious cause of death, something I was never able to find out what happened exactly. I put in a congressional inquiry, and as soon as I did that, I was forced out of the service. So I followed up once I got back home with a local congressman, and he at one point had said, if I was you, I wouldn't make waves about this or your benefits will get cut. And I
So what's
said,
the time frame around that
so
period?
this would have happened. My husband died in February of 1984. And there was a lot of press about this because there was a woman right here at MacDill Air Force Base whose husband had gone down in an F-16 in the Gulf of Mexico. And she was working very hard at trying to prove that it was not pilot error, that there was something wrong with the F-16 that he was in. So this was a lot of media attached to this, and the congressman, who has since passed, really didn't want anything to do with it. He didn't want to touch my story, but I asked him, is this a threat, what you're telling me? And he said, you can take that whatever way you want. And this was after several meetings with him. He knew me.
Right.
We had talked in person, and I walked out and resigned myself to the fact that I had the benefits as a widow would have, but I was never going to get any clear answers. 2 years and a month later, my husband's brother, his plane went down in Norway during a Euro NATO fighter pilot exercise. and his remains were not recovered until August
Wow.
of that year. So this would have been March of 86. And the parents at that point didn't want to follow up or do anything to try to find out what happened to both sons. They were their only sons. So I right away started getting really busy. I was going to University of Tampa. I was working. I tried to fill my days with just constant activity and didn't grieve as I should have, and really didn't realize that there was a lot of problems going on, codependency, um, and just the grieving process was never touched on. And I really had no one to really discuss anything with. So I figured, okay, let me get as much knowledge under my belt as I can. And in 88, I moved to Washington, D.C. So I was in Washington, D.C. for 8 years, again, working for a huge hotel and making quite a bit of money trying to crack into getting a government job. But that never happened. I started to think, wow, what is wrong with me? Do I have some kind of flag on my name because of my experience with doing this congressional inquiry or with the military or whatever? And I could only resign myself to the fact that 8 years I lived in DC and I tried to get a government job and could not get one. And I couldn't even get a job with the post office. So that energy followed me around for many, many years, not being able to get a job that was going to pay me enough just to pay for my expenses to live, to buy a home, to have some stability and security. So, along with a lot of therapy, many years of therapy, a move back here to Florida when my mother got ill. And I did meet someone at that point who I'm still with. So we've been together for 30 years. But lots of issues along the way that seem to always stemmed to not having enough, always having a lack, um, and just that lack of stability and security and not finding out exactly what happened back then.
Yeah.
No closure,
Exactly.
and that hurt more than anything. So my poor Leon has kind of lived in the shadow of that over
Mhm.
these years. Um, so I've resigned myself to the fact that those questions will probably never be answered. But within the past 3 years, I was able to buy a home. I wasn't able to set up this stability and security for myself until I retired. So
It's a
I'm
long
great.
time.
Say that again?
It's a long time to
Yeah.
get to that
Yeah.
point.
During the work years, it was never a comfortable place for me to be in.
Yeah.
And I gathered that once a woman turns around 45 or 50, the harder it is to get work, at least
Absolutely.
meaningful work.
Yeah, for sure.
And so at that point, I realized I had to make my own work. And I started to work a lot with hospice patients because that was steady work doing private duty as a caretaker. And that's what I did for probably a good 10, 15 years. And then once I retired, um, uh, we tried another move actually to Pennsylvania to work on an organic farm, and that didn't work very well. So we ended up back here, and I was able to buy a home in 2022.
Yeah.
So
One of the things that strikes me the most about you is in our conversations, and Anita and I talk maybe at least once a month, often twice a month. And we talk about all kinds of issues. We talk about political and social issues, economic issues. And one of the things that strikes me the most about Anita is how well informed she is. So I'd like you to share with our guests your background with some of the politicians that you've worked with, some of the departments that you worked with, some of the state governments you've worked with, groups.
I I very I felt very drawn to the environmental movement. Um, that seemed to be my tribe of people. So early on, after I got back here after my stay in DC for 8 years, of course, getting involved in DC was exactly where it started. And then once I moved here, I realized, wow, this Florida's kind of like ripe for the picking, and nobody's really giving a care at all about land, water, all of that. I got really involved also after 911 when I started to um, figure out that there were too many unanswered questions, um, that led me to believe that it was an inside job, that there was, again, so much secrecy, like what had
Mm,
happened to me personally. There was definitely secrecy in the government. So I got very involved in the anti war movement early on. I
mm,
joined Code Pink. I worked with Veterans for Peace and helped set up the local chapter here. Um, and I met Dennis Kucinich on his Congressman Kucinich on his first presidential campaign in 2004. And I had said, if he decides to run again, I'm going to work for him. And that's exactly what happened. So I connected with him. I was brought on to the 2008 campaign and basically worked. And it was pretty new at the time, working with new media
mm,
in campaigns. It had
right.
never really been done before. And
Hmm.
Ron Paul's camp, he was another candidate who was also very, very good friends with Dennis. They were the two anti war candidates during that election cycle. So we were interfacing a lot with Ron Paul people, even though Ron Paul was running as a Republican. And after the Kucinich campaign, when I saw how the Democrats, how badly they had treated Dennis Kucinich, I vowed to never be a Democrat again, and I went green. So I became a
Hmm.
national delegate for the Green Party. I ran for office myself for the Hillsborough County Soil and Water Board. I won. I served 4 years there, always looking at the environmental issues here in Florida and anti war movements, whoever was doing them. And now the biggest issue that we're working on is taking the fluoride out of city water
Hmm.
systems. Um,
Quick question. Were you in Florida during the Gulf oil spill?
the Gulf oil spill was a big one because I was doing a lot of podcasts. I was working with a nurse who was actually going and doing the water testing and working with the patients who were sick. Many of these people have died, and it's been so covered up. People that were exposed to not just the crude, but the Corexit, which was a chemical that was
Mm,
carpet bombed in the Gulf of Mexico. And it was designed to sink the oil, destroy the evidence. When, and this was a factoid, when you apply Corexit to crude oil, the whole mess together is 52 times more toxic than just the crude oil itself. So, with a lot of the work, and of course, we were again using new media,
mm,
using Facebook and other social platforms to connect with each other throughout the Gulf of Mexico, because this was affecting people living in Mexico, Texas, all around the whole Gulf region
mm,
were being affected by this poisoning. And another, it's a mass poisoning. I can't call it anything else. And another thing that people don't know is there's 37,000 oil wells out there in the Gulf of Mexico.
37,000. Oh my
37.
God.
Some are not active, but all of them do what's called burping.
Right.
So they will literally burp, it, gas or fluids from under the surface.
Wow.
So there's a constant toxicity that's happening in the Gulf of Mexico, and no one seems to even really want to take this on. We had Hands Across the Sand initiatives to increase awareness. I was on a lot of radio shows. And then after that, we had the Sable Trail pipeline came in. And unfortunately, that cause was happening right around the time of Standing Rock, which was getting all the media at the time out west. So many of our activists were literally doing caravans out to Standing Rock, and we had very few people here that were actually fighting Sable Trail, but we had people lock down on equipment and try to stop the pipeline from being built and going through. To this day, they won. They're running that pipeline right along major population centers. Um, there's no safety plans in place if there's an accident. And I think, pardon me, and I think the thing that bothers me the most is this huge pristine area, which is just like 10 miles to the northeast from my home here,
Which is
is
in
called
Zephyr Hills.
Zephyr Hills, Florida. Yeah. It's
Mhm.
called the Green Swamp.
Right.
And the Green Swamp is the watershed that provides all the drinking water for Tampa. And Tampa Bay itself, it's made up of several different cities, several different counties, is over 3 million people.
Wow.
So if there is an accident out there, the water is in danger. Even here in Zephyr Hills, there's been such a huge amount of building and putting these cookie cutter housing developments around. And at one point, I guess it was during a city hearing, they said, we have to stop, we have to curtail the growth at this point because there's not enough water infrastructure um, to fit all the amount of people that are going to be buying these homes.
So
But they're still building.
getting back to your story and how you've been involved in all of these things and how it's affected you. Do you think the Gulf oil spill might have affected your health in particular?
I stopped going to the beach when it happened, so I didn't want to walk on the sand or swim. And to this day, we're talking 2010, I have not been to the beach. And I live
Wow.
here in Florida,
Wow.
you know. And that it makes me worry a lot about just, scientifically we learn in school about evaporation, water evaporating coming down as rain.
Mhm.
um you know it remains to be seen. All I know is I was diagnosed with leukemia in 2015,
Mm.
and um I don't know whether where that came from. I had always lived in apartment complexes that were very close to golf courses where they spray Roundup routinely, and and then there was the Gulf oil spill. If I was getting it from rain or some other way,
Yeah.
um, or it could have been the military, and I was exposed to something and didn't even know it.
Right.
So
I'm wondering I'm wondering if they've done any studies on the population because of the oil spill in terms of health impacts.
well, that's what my colleague was working on because she was an RN, an ARNP, and she was working throughout the Gulf to actually talk to people and develop these stats. And And she's had some issues. I'm not going to name her here, but she's had some issues with acquiring work. She's very much capable in, nursing. She's done it all her life, but she's had issues lately with work and having something that's steady for her. And I wonder if there's some kind of black mark against her name.
Right.
Uh, she has gone to places like uh, up in the panhandle where there was quite a lot of the crude oil and a lot of the spraying because they were never supposed to spray the Corexit over land.
Yeah.
They were supposed to spray it 3 miles off the coast. That was the restriction. And it was military C-130s that were spraying it.
Wow.
And I was able to find this out and get evidence that it was being sprayed by our own military aircraft. So that freaked me out, being a veteran, saying, wow, our military is responsible for this, you
Hmm.
know. And the other thing too was our military also guarded the wells and the Macondo in particular. So the media were taking boats out there to get pictures,
Mm.
and the Coast Guard was turning them away. And I'm going, this is crazy. This is our military that's supposed to protect us. What
Right.
are they doing? They are protecting corporate interests, not we the people.
That's the typical story when it comes to these things, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So the big fight here is for water, and I can't say I'm totally involved in it, but I've still got like 1 foot in it. So,
Yeah.
and then of course, Zephyr Hills, where I live, is well known for its bottled spring water.
Right.
And even the US doesn't own that anymore. It's owned by Nestle. I guess it's
Yes.
a German Swiss company.
Yes.
But the actual springs are 5 miles from here. So when I first moved to Zephyr Hills, we were getting that beautiful spring water right out of the tap,
Wow.
and they changed that eventually.
Hmm.
So, so those are some of the things I worked on. I worked on as a volunteer with uh, presidential candidate Jill Stein. Um, I worked later. I worked in the very beginning of Bobby Kennedy's campaign. I agreed with everything he's done in regards to protecting the water, protecting the environment. Right now, everyone is kind of watching to see if he's going to get into that health and human services
Mm.
position, which he needs to have that job. That's exactly right up his alley, and
Yeah.
I think he will help the people once he's in there. Um,
I agree.
he's he's certainly won all these lawsuits, and he's written all these books. And with all the books that he's written, he hasn't been sued.
No, he's extremely thorough when it comes to references and studies, and he's very solid with his backing up of information that he says publicly.
Right. Yeah. So
So,
nobody can come back on him and say he's in error, or,
yeah.
he's not telling the truth, or whatever the case may be. And
Hmm.
that's apparently how he litigated too, because he's sued all these big polluters.
Yeah.
And
I wonder, was he involved in the lawsuit against Monsanto about glyphosate?
yes,
I thought
yeah,
so.
he was involved in that too.
Hmm.
So those are some of the things that I've done in regards to work. I made a vow to myself that I was going to, once I retired, I was going to do those things that give me bliss.
Hmm.
And
Tell us more about that. Tell us more about the things that bring you bliss. Like we've talked about some of the services that you offer and how you help people and how it brings joy into your life. And I'm just so amazed by everything that you're involved in, and I've learned so much from you. So yeah, I want to hear more about that.
I When I was working with patients, I had a lot of time when they were sleeping, especially if I was doing like 3 days at a stretch. I could take my computer and actually create things online. So I was doing putting together a business back in 2009, 2010, and it was called Tarot and Stars. And it still exists, tarotandstars.com. So I read the tarot, do astrology, and have clients from everywhere. At the current time, I'm working at a little metaphysical store that's down in Tampa. I work there 1 day a week if somebody wants to meet with me in person. And then during the week, I do FaceTime or Zoom or appointments. I'll do appointments in person, but I think where I have the most fun is when I do parties like around the holidays. I love
Nice.
those.
Yeah.
So I'll do but even showers. I did a party right before Christmas, actually, that was at the Vinoy, which is one of the swankiest
Very cool.
hotels down here in St. Pete. Not on St. Pete Beach, but in St. Pete downtown. And it was for a very, very fancy Swiss watch company. So that was a lot of fun. It was all their employees at this Christmas party, all their upper level employees, and that was a great experience. So I do showers or weddings, or I love to do like a birth chart for a newborn at a shower.
Nice.
So all these different things that I do. I um, I have a huge collection of tarot cards. I've done some reviews. I like doing the reviews, but so many people are doing them online that I often think, it's kind of like overkill,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And the other thing, I like working with astrology a lot because it gives me um, the personality of the person that's sitting in front of me,
Right.
and then helping them gives me joy. I mean, there may be unresolved things happening in my life,
Mm,
but I feel like good karma comes back to you
for sure.
when you can give.
Yeah.
Um, so I've been collecting all these art supplies. And I'm thinking, I don't know, I just have kind of like a bug in my craw, as that we say in
Yes.
the South, where I need to do some open air,
Yeah.
some plein air paintings, and getting out in nature and working with watercolors. So I've done it for years. My mother was an artist, but never focused on it. And now that I have the time,
Mm-hmm. Very
maybe
cool.
I'll maybe I'll be another Grandma Moses. Who
There you
knows?
go. There you go. How awesome is that? Now, share with our guests, share with our audience, your musicianship, your music
Yeah,
background.
that has been music has been my biggest joy. And when I was young, I was classically trained through the church, of course. It was singing madrigals and hymns and everything in Latin, because back then the Catholic Church was in Latin, not English. My mother actually at one point was going to become a nun, and she was raised in a convent school in New England, but her family was French Canadian. And from Quebec, had migrated from Quebec. And then my father, Irish, Scottish, and Sami, and he came into Detroit through Ontario. So both were super, super Catholic, and insisted that we go to Mass as long as we were living in the house until we were 18. My father said that. He said, you can do whatever you want after you turn 18. You can join the Hare Krishnas and go sell incense at the airport if you want. But while you're living in my house, you're going to be Catholic and go to Mass. So I was classically trained. And then when I got into school, Of course, my father owned a rock and roll radio station, the first one in Western PA, WQTW. So I was in love with rock and roll from the time I could walk. I knew the words to every song. I could sing along on the radio. I heard my dad's voice on the radio. So it was all very familiar to me. And I would go to the station to see him spin records. And, um, and he had started out in Detroit before we moved from Detroit to Pennsylvania. Um, So, with that said, we took our instruments in school. My brother was a drummer, and I grabbed the flute and worked with the flute for a while. And later on, as I approached my teens, it was the big thing to have a guitar and have guitar
Mhm.
lessons. So I did that. Was never good at guitar, as good as I could have been because my hands were so small.
Yeah.
So I had a really hard time with the neck of the guitar and getting
Mm.
my hand around there to get
Mm.
the chords just right. So after the peace movement, my good friend Charisse, um, she was so upset about politics and she had been involved too. And she said, I'm done. I'm going to form a ukulele club. Why don't you be a part of it?
Mhm.
So I joined her and started working with the ukulele, which was an instrument that was easy for me because
Mm.
the neck was small.
Yes.
So, so I started working with that and helping her, put this group together. And there was a lot of people. And at the same time, she was putting a website together to start doing interviews, music reviews, things like that. So it's called rocketnight.com. So she asked me to be managing editor, and that's still happening. I've kind of taken a less active role,
Mm.
um, but I've done some great interviews and
Yes.
podcasts with musicians. And always, music has been my joy. Going to see the next concert is always fun for me. Pardon me.
So you've
And
met some pretty famous musicians. I know you've shared a few with me.
Yeah. Devin Allman, I did a great interview with. Dave Mason, I did a great interview with. Um, I'm trying to, Eric Gales, one of the best guitarists in the world, actually.
Mm.
But they're all the podcasts are on Rocket Night. If anybody wants to go listen to them, and then the reviews um, are fun. You get the record or the album first, and then you review it and write it up. And I started out not doing these with AI, but what I've found, excuse me, what I've found is using AI to kind of get an outline. Um, and I would never say that I use this because I don't want AI to do the writing for me,
Right.
you know. So I'll put something in to AI, like a specific question, and it'll come up with like um, whatever bits of information it has. Like it might be a paragraph. And
Hmm.
now I'll incorporate that and change it around a little bit and
Yeah.
make it mine.
Right.
Um, but I'm kind of against AI, like writing the whole thing.
I hear you.
You know?
Yeah. I've used AI as well to create course outlines, but from there I completely modify it. It's just a starting point. It's a
Yeah,
quick way to trigger your own thoughts about the work that you're putting together. So,
exactly. I have a lot of I have a lot of fun connecting with the people if I'm writing up an interview or um, I might get an album to review, but I might want some specific information about how the band got started, or I have some questions about a song or
mhm,
whatever. And I can connect with the band and ask them those specific questions
right.
and then use that as a quote within the article itself.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of fun doing that. Of course, I sing myself, play ukulele, always have music going,
Mm-hmm.
always.
Mm,
Um,
that's good.
and
I'll be
what
putting
is
links to those various websites in the description of the video.
so I have a few um, of my favorites right now, but it
Hmm.
changes. You
Yes.
know, I like Natalie Rise for reggae, and she's coming out with a new album and she's going on a new tour. She's an Australian reggae artist,
Very cool.
but she lives in Jamaica. And I love um, I love Billy Strings,
Yes.
and he's like capturing the world right now. He's just on such a high, just
And
this.
what would you say his musical genre is?
Well, they've called him country and they've called him bluegrass, but when he picks up a guitar, he can play anything.
Yeah.
So he's done rock and roll sets and played like Black Sabbath, Led
Oh
Zeppelin.
my
You
God.
know,
Oh
he
my
can
God.
play anything.
I watched the videos that you shared with me and they're absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah. And he looks like a little kid, so you'll see if you're watching the YouTube videos, I find it pretty funny to watch those, and then have like guitar experts that are actually giving a review of the video they just watched, or
Right.
they're making a comment, and they all call him the kid.
Hmm.
This kid is good, or something
Because
like
he
that.
is young, isn't he? How
Yeah,
old is he now?
he's 32. But he looks like a kid. He's married. He and his wife just had a baby. And he came from a rather crazy background, and
Mm,
he's definitely overcome quite a bit in his life to get where he is now. So that's a good artist. The other artist is kind of it's a 12-piece band,
mm.
Tedeschi Trucks Band.
Oh, yes. You're going to
They're
their
from
concert.
Yeah, they're from Jacksonville, and Derek Trucks, the lead guitarist, is the nephew of the original drummer Butch Trucks from the Allman Brothers. So there's definitely a connect to that Allman Brothers
Mm,
family. You know, there's a lot of bands that have branched out, but Derek
right.
Trucks was playing guitar when he was a little kid, and the first time he came on stage with them at a big festival was when he was 13, and you can still see that YouTube video out there. He
Mm.
played Layla
Oh,
by
for
Eric.
goodness sake.
Yeah, Derek and the Dominoes. And of course, that's how he got his name, Derek Trucks.
Right.
So, and Susan Tedeschi is his wife, and she plays lead also, and she's amazing.
I think I saw her singing in a video yesterday. It just came across my feed, and I decided to watch it because the last name was familiar from what you had shared with me. So yeah, pretty
And
awesome.
she's from, they live in Jacksonville, but she's from the Boston area, I believe.
Right.
So she kind of became Southern. So there's a lot of really good music down here in Florida, but I would say probably one of the best touring bands is Tedeschi Trucks right now.
Right.
Um, so music has given me my biggest joy besides tarot and helping people, and I think karmically just absorbing myself in the arts.
Right.
Um, of any kind has made me feel really good. I love to watch dancers, but I'm
Yeah.
not the best.
So I'm thinking back to all our conversations, Anita, and I know you and I have shared both of our stories with each other. And what I'd like you to maybe um, speak to as we start wrapping up here is what kind of what should people take away from what you've learned? What tips can you offer people about how to stay on track and persist and keep moving through difficult times. Is there anything that you can share with people, such as maybe taking up a hobby that gives their life more meaning and focus? Is there anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would say never count on people to lift you up. Don't count on um, don't count on your partner. Don't count on friends. This is this is a time when you're feeling the lowest to get to know yourself and to figure out what those things are that give you joy, that give you bliss, that want to keep you moving, even if you're at the depths of despair and you want to end it all. there's there's always light up above. Like, what makes you smile when you go to YouTube and you watch videos? Which videos make you smile? It could be a video of helping a stray dog. Maybe that's what you're meant to do, you know?
Or pet videos. My personal favorite is Dry Bar Comedy. Have you
Oh
heard of
yeah, yeah.
Dry Bar Comedy? Is an amazing website. And honestly, at the darkest times of my life, when I really just need to clear my mind of all the toxic images and words that I've been taking in, it really is one of the best ways to let go, even temporarily.
My friend, a very good friend of mine, she's had a very, very tough time and just lost her son recently. And yesterday she told me that she had been drinking, and I started to worry about her. And I told her, I said, you need to get up, get dressed, go out into nature somewhere,
Yes.
um, get into the sunshine, um, take a sketch pad with you and do some art, or paint what you see.
Hmm.
Um, but don't stay in a dark room with a bottle. That's like the worst thing you could do.
Hmm.
Um, and then the other thing to think about is when you've lost somebody like that, um, what would they want you to do?
That's a beautiful thought,
You know,
for sure.
they wouldn't want you sitting in the room with the bottle. They would want you to continue to live,
Mm,
because every minute is a gift.
yeah.
And
I
we can
remember,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember going to a therapy session, which involved reflecting on my brother who was killed in a car accident when he was 21. And I was 26 at the time. And this therapy session was, I was 56, 57 years old. And it, it was such a profound session because it occurred to me, and I felt, because of the way the therapy session worked, I felt his presence
Hmm.
because it was so well um, put together, just the way that this session unfolded. I felt his presence, and I felt like he was telling me, "You've been grieving for me longer than I was alive."
Wow.
And that's
Wow.
that from that moment on. And to your point, um, he, in this message that I received, also said, I would not have wanted you to be grieving this long. And it's
Mhm.
also a way to avoid living your life is to stay in grief. So yeah, that's a really good point. Is what would they want for you if you've lost somebody?
And somebody told me this the other day, like, time heals all wounds. Well, does it really? I think we're all scarred in some way.
Mm,
Those wounds have grown over and time has gone on. Um, but whatever we took away from those experiences is meant to be used to help someone else.
yes.
So I always think of those things, like what I know when I'm talking to someone. I've had women come to me to get a tarot reading that are just at the depths of despair and have no idea where to turn, or they don't know how they're going to feed their children. And, you know, trying to give them or have the universe just work through me to give them options, to
Mm.
have them maybe have to launch some ideas that maybe they didn't have on their own, you
Right.
know. And at that point they can walk out of the session feeling happy, or maybe having something to work on
Yeah.
as they go forward. So I
Baby
hope.
steps, right?
Yeah,
Baby
baby
steps.
steps. Exactly. And I always feel very committed to helping, especially the young women that have children, because I think in this day and age, the single women with children are having the roughest time of it. They don't have any security, they have very little stability. Not all of them, but most of them. And here the rents are so high and the cost of living is so high. If
And
you have,
trans ideology as
yeah,
well, dealing
yeah,
with trans ideology and being concerned about their kids being um,
yeah.
programmed in school to believe things that are not true. So,
And down here, if you can't provide for your children, then you have DFS or whatever they CPS or whatever. They'll come and take your kids. So these poor single mothers are in fear of that
oh
all
my
the time. That if I can't feed my kids, or I don't have groceries in the house or whatever, somebody comes in to inspect, my kids will be gone.
wow.
And once you lose them, it's really, really hard to get them back. So,
Yeah. Something tells me that's intentional, quite honestly. It's like
absolutely.
the state wants our children.
Yep, absolutely. It's very scary, and I thank the universe that I didn't have children. I made that conscious um, decision when I was young. When I was working in Intel and I started to read some of the futuristic exercises that were going to be used, which mimic what's happening today.
Mm,
It was mind blowing,
yeah.
and I was so young at the time. I wasn't even 30 yet, and I was looking at these things, and I was going, "Is this the crap they're going to pull, or is this really going to happen, or is it just made
Right.
up, or um, if this is a real thing, I don't want to bring my children into a world that would be like this one."
Social engineering, very much part of
Yeah,
the current unfolding.
and we don't know a lot of times when we're looking at um, the news, for instance, we don't know if it's real. Many times it probably isn't, but that
Yeah.
has a lot to do with the social engineering. And like you brought up the trans, how this is acceptable,
Mm,
um, acceptable behavior. Well, to whom? You
yeah.
know, because most Americans don't want that.
No. It
So
has to
not
be shoved down their throat, sadly. Um,
right,
People, and also too, there's a lot of assumptions that are made that it's like the next civil rights movement, when in fact it's all engineered by the pharmaceutical companies. In fact, pharmaceutical billionaires, as you know, the Pritzkers,
right.
um, are actually trying to convert us into thinking that our body parts are interchangeable. And
Ooh, that's creepy.
it is creepy. And transhumanism is their agenda. They want to upload our consciousness to a computer and get rid of the human biology altogether. And so you read this stuff and you think, how how is it that human beings can survive that? Well, I'm a big believer that human beings are extremely resilient. Um, that's why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. My mission in life now is sharing with people all all those that we don't know about, all the individuals, all the communities that survive unbelievable hardship and setbacks and resist, resist any kind of project that is going to take away their humanity.
Hmm.
Kind of what I feel is happening is our humanity is being stripped from us. But we are incredibly resilient as biological species. We've endured, but it remains to be seen as to whether individuals can find within themselves the strength. But I know that you have. So, Anita, I just as we wrap up here, I want to thank you so much for your friendship. You are such a delight every time we talk, and I am looking forward to our next conversation. But for today, I think we're going to wrap up at this point. And please take good care of yourself. I know that you're dealing with leukemia. Where are you with that journey, by the way?
Well, I was very upset the other day because I went to the VA hospital and found out that my hematologist decided to retire.
Oh, no.
So that was a shock, and I was told, well, he didn't even tell anybody.
Yeah.
And so they were dealing with the patients coming in for regular appointments and saying, well, he's not here anymore. So I'm kind of in between the new doctor. So I did see an ARNP who went over my numbers and said, these are like perfect. We
Good.
couldn't ask for more perfect numbers.
Yeah.
So my only downfall is maybe having a lot of fatigue at different times.
Right.
So
And
I have to walk, yeah,
you,
work the energy. I have to work with the energy level a lot of
yeah,
time.
and you do try to stay fit by walking your dogs.
Yeah, and staying active, just staying active in general.
Mhm.
Swimming, swimming when the weather's right. So, um,
Very cool. Well, again, thank you so much.
thank
And
you for having me.
I am so delighted. My very first podcast guest. This session has been recorded. I will be editing it before it's released, and it will be posted on YouTube and on my Substack. So I will send you the link when that's done, and also Facebook. I'll share it on Facebook, so you can check it out there. And we'll talk soon. Bye for
All
now.
right, thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
day.